Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Three Losers in a Church. This is episode 8, I believe, titled Despised for Your Youth. And today we're just kind of talking about the subject of age, specifically in regards to ministry. And I think I'm kind of excited to see the dynamic because there is like a 9-year range between the three of us, I think. And Sam and I we've volunteered in youth ministry. And Tyler was in that youth ministry while we were volunteering, and now is aged out and has also done some of his own volunteering of youth ministry.
And there's a nice number of 4 years difference between all of us.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Is it
19, 23. I'm turning 24.
and 28? Yeah. So, yeah, and then just age in general and ministry and life and yeah.
Yeah, and like the challenges, but also kind of like the joy and like understanding it brings out of that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, I thought I'll start off with the Bible verse about this. I think it's a verse from Timothy that I used in one of my teachings once. But I think really anything from either book of Timothy or Titus would be applicable. But the one I wrote down is, if I can see it, let's see. Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity. And that's 1 Timothy 4:12, the ESV version. That's redundant. Acronym.
ESV.
V is version.
That
Anyway.
is true.
Lol.
ATM machine.
Wait, I've never Wow.
Yeah.
I'm slow.
PIN number.
Oh, wow. Personal identification number. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I never even
Wait,
thought
what
of
does
that.
PI stand for?
Personal
Personal
identification.
identification.
I'm so sorry. You literally just said that
Yeah.
right after I asked. I'm so sorry. I mean, right before I asked.
Yeah, it's okay. But I think looking at that, right, like in speech and conduct, in love, in faith, and purity, right, it's easy to see that like age is not a qualifier for service or ministry, right?
Mm.
I mean, like it even says quite the opposite, right? Like despite your youth.
Right.
Mm.
So like how that doesn't even play a piece in that. And like that's frustrating for me in a lot of ways, like being on the receiving end of being young a lot of the times. Like I've kind of made a name for myself, so I'm not like not taken seriously because I'm young, but like a lot of the times it was difficult, right? Like when I was volunteering on property team originally, like I wasn't allowed to get a key to open some of the downstairs rooms because I was young, because I wasn't trusted that I wasn't going to do bad things in the church building.
Right.
And which is kind of weird. But anyways, yeah, it took like, but I had to build that trust relationship just because of my age, right?
It's because people associate. So I'm gonna have to disagree with you to some degree because I think there's an association of age with maturity, right?
For sure.
And personally, like I don't think it's so black and white, right? Like I don't think because you are old, you are wise. I'm sure both of us, all three of us, have met people who are much older than us and they are not wise.
Chris White.
Oh.
Sorry.
My feelings.
Or we've definitely met people who are younger than us who are significantly wiser than us in different aspects.
Oh, for
But
sure.
I think that's where people like associate age with maturity. And I personally I don't even know what I'm thinking right now, but I do think none of that made sense. But I think it's about gauging and understanding. It is also wise for you to identify and see the maturity of another individual as well. Like there's a lot of guessing, in my opinion, when it comes to that. So I disagree. I disagree with how the property management team dealt with you, but the logic of what they say. I mean, naturally, some people say with age comes maturity and wisdom, which is not untrue. But going back to the other statement, age does not necessarily.
Yeah. I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
I'm
for
so
sure.
sorry.
Like-
Yeah, it's hard.
I mean,
yeah.
on the flip side, right? I was like maybe 14, if that.
Oh
like,
yeah, I would not have trusted you. Right
No,
off the bat.
and I'm pretty sure I had like every key to the building. I've had it for a long time, most of them, which is terrifying.
More than the pastors.
Honestly, yeah. Whoa.
Yeah, so for a long time, which I guess goes to show how much I live at First Baptist. But
What a loser.
I'm a loser. Oh,
In a
what's the name?
church.
In a church.
Literally a loser in a church. Wow, so fitting. But so like it's understandable why it was a process. Right? They still gave me a lot of keys, and then they're like, okay, well this one, let's hold off on this one.
Mm.
Like I was like, I could already get into the building. I couldn't
Wait,
up
like
for it.
Right.
what do they hold off on? Like a master key?
It was a master key, yeah.
Though you had every single key?
Well, so originally I didn't have all of them. I only had a couple, so I could open a couple doors to get inside, and then like a couple things to like open closets to like clean and do that kind of stuff. It was weird.
I'm sorry. I'm just like flabbergasted that you have the keys to the majority of the building, and then they're like, you can't have a master. Oh, but it's like the other pastoral offices, I'm assuming.
So that was just like I only now have keys to pastoral offices, but back then I didn't have them. So
Interesting.
I really started with a front door key and a hub interior key.
Oh, not even the exterior.
Not even a hub exterior, yeah. So
Fascinating.
I could get in the front door. That's a lot of the time.
So the hub is our what was formerly our youth group's room. And there's two doors, one that's on the interior and one on the exterior. But now that is the Freedom Cafe.
It is.
Shameless plug for the Freedom Cafe if you want to.
I'm wearing a shirt, but now I'm lifting up my sweatshirt on camera and it looks weird. But Freedom Cafe.
He drank for freedom.
Located on the underside of First Baptist.
That bottom floor, maybe.
Shady underbelly at
I
First Baptist Church.
Don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, if you guys like coffee, if you guys happen to be in the Pioneer Valley, check it out. Entirely run by volunteers. This cafe supports the fight against human trafficking. So, drink to
plug.
freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Insert website.
If you want to sponsor us too, I mean, by all means.
We all know
You want to throw some money?
we all know Dan Johnson, and our office is now next to Dan
Yeah,
Johnson.
we have an office in Freedom
Congratulations, gentlemen. But yes.
Cafe. But yeah, I like that. That's another tangent. But so yeah, the keys are like a very tangible example of like issues caused by this like disconnect between maturity and age, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so like age is how many times around the sun you've been on the earth,
Right.
but which is sorry, but like if you look at the maturity, I think this Timothy passage, right, kind of breaks it down well. And of course, like the worldly view of maturity versus like a biblical view are a little different in some ways, but similar in a lot of ways. So I think like in speech and conduct are like the two biggest ways the
Yeah.
world kind of views like maturity per se. So if you like hold your stuff to a high standard and you like speak well
Mhm.
enough to
Would-
kind of
yeah.
get yourself through situations.
People take
fat-
notice.
Yeah,
Right.
it's fascinating you say that because, like, I think as youth leaders, like, one narrative that we always fall under is like when we hear a youth speak so eloquently, we're like, "Whoa, this kid's so mature." Like, I've heard this a lot. I mean, I've been guilty of that as well, right? It's like they say they're so mature for their age, but then I remember there's moments where like this individual will speak eloquently, but then I think about what they're saying, and I'm like, "Oh, they don't actually know
Yeah.
Right.
anything."
And I think like that's where like it's interesting that speech is the first one, right?
Mm.
Or, like I think it's like kind of a progression. So you look at like in speech, like wow, they really hold themselves well. They can
Yeah.
formulate great sentences. They can make a lot of sense. They can give compelling arguments, right?
Mhm.
And then like in conduct, so like how they hold themselves and are they really following through with those statements and sentences,
Mhm.
right? And then the
Mm.
next one is in love, like do they care for the
Yeah.
people,
Right.
right? And then in faith, and like
Because
so it goes
theoretically,
on and
good
on.
conduct leads to like a natural care for other people.
Right.
Right.
Can we touch on that though? What is the difference between the Christian sense of conduct and the worldly sense of like good mature conduct, right?
Mhm.
Does
Is
that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, is
Right,
there a
that's a very
difference?
good point.
Right.
I mean, the first thing I thought of was like choices, right? Like, do
Mhm.
you make like I guess conduct, anyways, but like, do you choose to make good choices?
Mhm.
Right?
Mm.
Like, is that the decision you make out of being in those situations? And of course, that's like not conduct, right? I guess some people could say like, oh, well, I guess life is full of choices, so I guess it is kind of a way of conduct. But like,
Because you can poorly conduct yourself, you're still conducting, I guess, right?
right, but you're still and like in the process of poorly conducting yourself, you are making poor choices.
Mhm.
So they're like kind of one and the same, because like even like choosing to go faster than the speed limit is a choice, and people would consider that poor conduct.
Right.
Mm.
So they're like kind of interchanged. I was trying to separate them, but I realized it's kind of difficult too.
Yeah.
But like, so the first thing I think of, is, of course, is like good choices is like a good show of what good conduct is.
Mhm.
Poor choices is a good example of what poor conduct is.
Yeah. So would you say that good, like, spiritual conduct is like modeling yourself after Christ kind
I-
of thing? Like, do you think it's that specific, or does it refer to just things like that as well? Or
See, if it didn't have the last line of impurity, I would go with yes. But I think the conduct is like making good choices, right?
Yeah, and purity is more like
And
the
purity
intent
is
behind
yeah,
it.
like
and-
I think that's what that means.
Mhm.
So I mean, like they are interchanged. Like you make good decisions out of like your good intentions.
Yeah,
You can also make good choices out of poor intentions as well,
true. I've done that before, I think.
though. Every day of my life. So I mean, yeah, I think that's kind of like that, and I still like kind of like how this is written. The more and more I think about it, like, wow, this really goes in like if you were to look at someone and go like, wow, they're really mature. They speak really good. Like, oh, they really hold themselves to high standards.
Speak
Oh,
really well.
I am not.
I couldn't
mature.
resist the irony.
Thank you. Actually, it was good.
Speak really.
I've said it right so many times. and I said that one wrong.
That one moment.
But like so like if you're looking at someone and like in the progression of like how mature they are, right? Oh, they speak well. They hold themselves well. They care for others. They're really faithful. They're really like have good intentions and they're pure, right? Like
Mhm.
it's like it's very interesting. Like
Yeah,
it's like a progression of those.
true. And I guess I skipped a couple because love is actually after conduct too. So
Oh.
I actually jumped ahead by mistake. But yeah, I think that even makes more sense if you're
Mhm.
going in progression. You know,
I don't know why I keep raising. I've never
Yeah,
done
that's
this.
so bizarre. Sir.
you've been working in a school for 3 days and you're already.
It's horrifying. Last episode I said I got hired. This episode I started working. It's only been 3 school days, and my life has changed dramatically. What was I saying? Yeah, I've never done this.
That was weird.
That's so. I actually really dislike people who like instead of raising a hand, they do.
Sometimes I do that. Like, not I don't commit to it. I think, but I'll be like
Yeah.
half-heartedly.
Oh, I
It's
just kind of
almost
go like
worse. Yeah, like any sort of like my arm is
Yeah.
here.
I'm just trying to wave attention, but I also want to make a careful, or I want to clarify a distinction.
Mhm.
So when we talk about age, we're referencing instances where we have been looked down upon for age, but in the case where we've been looked down upon, are we talking? There's another question that arises: is there a difference between wisdom and maturity? Because I think when we talk about age and we talk about people who like don't look their age or aren't like they seem to be wiser than their age or more mature than their age, is there a difference between the two, maturity and wisdom, in terms of age?
I would think so.
Just to clarify for my sake.
Yeah, because I feel like you can be very wise or have a lot of good things to say, know what you're talking about, but not have the maturity to do anything with it. Almost.
Fascinating.
I was actually even thinking the flip side of how they're disconnected. Of like you can put on this level of like I know how to handle myself, but then you're like
But you lack
What?
the wisdom
right
to, yeah.
to like effectively execute that. Right.
Mhm. That's true, because you can be as mature as you want, but if you haven't even been faced with the life experiences to
Which I
need to be
yeah.
mature in a situation.
I think back to the example I used earlier about an individual who speaks so eloquently, right? They seem mature on the outside. They're very reserved. They're very orderly and very quiet, and like they listen. But then the wisdom of their life is displayed through like their lack of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. No, I don't know what I'm saying, but yeah. Sorry, but continuing on. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think of like, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is like camp, where you see all this growth in people and have really good conversations and like really get to know each other. But then at the same time, you also see people just going out and making fools of themselves.
Mhm.
And I guess regardless of age, because I'm guilty of that too.
Yeah, we were definitely some goons. Just to give some like background, like Chris and I, rollers represent.
And
did
actually,
not-
I'm wearing a huge.
Yes.
We should have some sponsors for this show.
We should message these. I didn't even know that was a huge shirt.
Yeah,
Oh.
down here, a little rep, Hume 2019.
May I confess? I thought that was like a what was it?
Interskate
Interskate
shirt. I
shirt.
do have one that's the same color, which is very funny.
That means they pulled off their goal for the theme, I think.
It is.
Very
That makes
retro.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause yeah.
But anyways, so Chris and I were both leaders, thank you, at FBC's youth summer camp. We go to Hume, New England. And so Chris and I were both leaders, and we would be like, "Oh, guys, stop being idiots," and then we'd like go in a room and be like, "Ah!"
The irony.
And some of that is just like decompression of like everything that's going on because it's so crazy.
Mm.
But like also kind of plays the part of like
We're just clowns.
right.
Mhm.
Like I don't think any of us are like terribly immature,
Right.
but like
There's that side, you know.
right, everyone has that side, but we also like have fun, and I think that's a part of it, right? Is like
Mhm.
knowing how and being able to like transition between like, oh wait, this is a serious moment where I need to have this attention and I need to like be serious,
Mm.
but also like, oh, I'm an idiot and I can have fun.
Yeah.
I would argue that's a case of wisdom right there, is it not?
Yeah.
Valid, no,
It's like
for
the
sure.
intersection of the two, kind of right there.
Yeah.
I guess.
There are instances where it would be okay to do such things, but then being wary enough about when it's not appropriate. I
Mhm.
think that also shows the idea of experience, right? Like we learn a lot from our experiences, which I think contributes to our wisdom, right? It's where
Mhm.
you're like, oh, now that I've had such experiences, I now can foresee and predict when I should be doing certain things or I should not be doing certain things.
Yeah, so you were saying was just talking about before some technical difficulty, the separation of wisdom versus maturity.
Yeah.
And Chris and I touched on how they're both kind of examples of ways you can be mature without wisdom and have wisdom without being mature.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because when you first said that, I was kind of like, oh wait, but they're not really separate.
Mm.
But as is everything in life, there's so many gray areas.
There is a bit of gray because I think I'm so sorry. Now that I work in a school, all I can think of is like the school. I mean, is that not? I mean, do you not think of Enterprise a decent amount?
No.
No, I mean, yeah, a lot of my examples come from
Yeah.
a restaurant.
In retrospect, I just vacuum cars. So
That's true. But I think about like the idea of maturity, right? Like I do think maturity can come along with age, right?
Mhm.
Hence the phrase "can" instead of "it comes along with age," because when you work with little kids, it's the idea of conduct, right? Conduct is learned. Conduct is produced over time. When you were younger, you were immature, but then as you grow older, you realize that wasn't okay. So I will now be mature for that. I think it's so fascinating because like a phrase that gets thrown around a lot is like, oh, you guys are more mature than this. You guys are much more mature than previous grades because you have grown, and then they associate that with maturity.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that like objectively age is a huge factor is like experience.
Yes.
You know,
I
because
agree
you've
with
just
that.
been alive longer.
Mhm.
But even in that, there are definitely some younger people that have had a lot more experiences in certain parts of life.
For
I mean,
sure.
there are kids growing up in like really tough lives that have experienced things that I'll never hopefully experience like or things that I haven't. There are people that have traveled far more than me that are
Yeah.
half my age, so even that, like, you're guaranteed more experiences as you get older and specific ones, but at the
Yeah.
same even then
It's circumstantial.
yeah
Right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna blatantly say this. I've used you as an example of like a man who's been slapped with life at a very young age, right? Because I didn't start working until like my first job was a work study that I worked like for $8 an hour, in my school setting at the age of like 14. You were working part-time jobs like a W-3 form and all that stuff. I mean, okay, my work study had W-3, but like you know what I mean, right? Like
W2.
W-2. Wow, I'm thinking of WD-40.
I am always confusing those two, dude.
Why?
I'm so glad you said that. I
One
don't
solves problems, one is the IRS. Those are two very different things.
W-2 forms. Wait, did I say that right?
Yes,
Yes,
I believe.
W-2 form.
W240.
I literally just filled one out on like Monday or Wednesday. Yeah. W-240. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know why that was so funny.
But like you were working. How many? Let me ask you a question. How many jobs have you worked? Like in different location, like different like
Yeah.
physical locations, right?
So, I think it's 5.
And that in itself
Yeah.
that's so many different experiences. I've never worked in a kitchen in my life.
Yeah.
Right, and that has nothing to do with age. It's just like you
Exactly.
said, circumstance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you were supporting yourself at a fairly young age.
Mhm.
This is my first time where I'm actually like kind of on my own. And yet here you were the renter's contract is under John Page's name, but we know it is under supposed to be under your name because you're the one who's had these experiences. So I'm just saying, like, age.
Is that something we should admit on recording?
I gotta sue me.
You guys aren't gonna report us.
No, I don't think we're breaking any lease agreements currently. I think we're okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if we lose our house, this podcast will get interesting fast.
We'll have the house at least for a couple more months, and then
Yeah, we'll be okay.
Yeah,
We're fine.
But I think that's a good example of where, like, age does not determine like maturity, or whatever I was trying to talk about last time. And I think it's like, it is your experiences that really shape you as an individual.
And I think that's an undisputed fact. Is like
Yes.
age and maturity are separated. I think the vast majority of people in this world, if you ask them that, secular, Christian,
Yes.
whatever, they will most likely disagree or agree that
Agree that they
they're
are
separate. I'm
separate.
sorry.
Yes.
I got a little sidetracked there, but like, so I think that is something that is known. But I still think it immediately goes like age, right? Is like the first judgment.
yes.
You'd like to
how-
assume older people are more
Yeah.
mature.
Right.
Yeah.
And most of the time that's a safe assumption. I'm not saying it's not. Young people do make bad choices, right? And some of it is like
Brain development.
brain
too.
development
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, it's physical.
Right.
What's the scientific age that you're supposedly it's like 20, 21, 22?
I think it's even older. I think it's like 26, 28.
Yeet.
Fact check insert right now. Yes, I don't know what it is. I don't know why.
We should find it and put a little
if you
graphic
know.
in the corner of the video.
The age was so and so. Yeah. So
Right.
developmentally,
So like
you have
physically, yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
Mhm.
But also like, as we were talking about, it's so much circumstantial and there's so much gray area. And it's not black and white. It's not like, oh, I'm 18 now. I, know this and I have this requirement and I can now do this. And,
Yeah.
oh, I'm 19 now. I can do this. Oh, I'm 20. I'm more. It's like, yeah. And like, to be honest, when I was applying for jobs, right, it was difficult for me, even though I have a lot of work experience and I have a lot of this stuff. As soon as I go in for an interview or talk to somebody on the phone, they go like, oh, wait, you're like not even 20.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to hire some kid, right?
Mhm.
And like, kind of justifiable. I don't know if I should have some of those jobs, but some of them I was definitely
What was like the
underqualified for.
sketch? Never mind. We could probably have an entire episode about you and your sketchy lifestyle.
Maybe we should.
How is my life sketchy? I feel like
Anywho,
my life is far
continue.
from, anyways. But I don't know. I think I know what you're talking about. But
Sketchy guy.
I'm super sketchy. Super sketchy.
It's funny because I feel old lately because I'm 28 and it's a college town. And the job I'm doing, there's a lot of, first of all, I work with a youth group, but also my job just is geared, like it's a good first job for high schoolers. So I work with a lot of like 16, 17-year-olds too. So usually I feel old, but I was directing the orchestra and choir for like 4 years. And in that
You did
context,
that
I
for that
felt,
long?
That's
Yeah.
a long time.
That's crazy. I didn't know you did that long.
yeah, I was in the orchestra 5 years. I directed both of them for 4.
When did I play an orchestra? 2 years ago?
I think so.
Bruh.
Yeah, but I felt young in that context, and a lot of the times that wasn't a factor. But then sometimes I could definitely feel that they viewed me as like a young person, for better or worse.
What was an instance of that?
Well, I think the most common one was they would a lot of the times in communicating, like I'm not going to be absent or this or whatever, they would email Evie, the pianist, and not me. Just because she's been there forever, and I think just because she's closer in age, they just feel more comfortable, like being like, "Oh, hey." And part of it is probably they assumed I wouldn't answer them because I'm bad at answering emails. Excuse me.
Text messages.
Excuse me.
Phone calls.
Okay. Point taken.
You've gotten better. I will give you that.
Thank
You
you.
are.
because
I'm
you-
working on
It's
it.
because he got a new phone.
Yeah,
The
honestly.
previous phone just did not give you notifications or anything, right?
Yeah, true. Unfortunately, I didn't have the same phone for 4 years.
Yeah,
so
no, you are much better.
Thank you. I'm working on it.
I will give it to you.
You have replaced. I've ignored your text messages.
Oof.
Chris,
Oh.
I have never ignored your text messages.
Never?
Not that I can recall.
Thanks.
Maybe I shouldn't admit that.
Sam is an awful friend. You heard it here.
I'm a communication major, and I like look at things and then I communicate when I want to.
Well, that's part of the majors. You get to You're like the supreme dictator of
Yeah, it's the
communication.
choice of replying or not. It's a power move. Of course, I'm not going to reply.
Supreme dictator of communication. What's your title, sir?
Welcome to First Baptist Church. I am the supreme dictator of communication
Oh.
here. Yikes. Do you think people look up to you because of your age as like a youth worker who's on the older side of things? Because I know we have like Julio, who's what, 43?
Is he?
He's
don't know.
really he's older than Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's told me. I was just commenting on this. I had dinner with him last night, and I asked him how old he was, and he like turned to his wife. He's like, I tell him this every time we meet up, and he just doesn't know. And that's true. I'm sorry, Julio.
He's not gonna be happy that we said his age on camera.
I mean, he looks great for his
Oh yeah,
age.
he's
Oh
He
yeah,
ran a
said-
he did a triathlon like a couple weeks ago, and he didn't even train for it.
because he does CrossFit. I mean,
Oh, I'm not a big.
Yeah.
No, he works at UMass. Never mind.
tangent. Julio
yeah.
tangent.
Oh yeah. Anyway, yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's weird for me to think about because it's me, but like I definitely look up to like Julio and Lisette, and I think
Mm.
part of it is because they're older than me and they have more life experience than me. And it was the same with Jonathan and Cynthia, who just moved, who were other leaders, and they weren't that much older than me, I think, but they were a little older, and just even those few years and the experiences they had together, I was like, wow, I definitely looked up to them, and obviously Josh and Allison.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Maybe
Did
I just
you-
look up to married couples. I don't know.
No, but that makes sense, right? I think
Mm.
marriage is a status of potential maturity and I mean, it is experience, right?
Right.
But it's funny you talk about that because the bus driver. So I'm a bus monitor as well. The bus driver I was with, he was telling me like, I was so dumb because I got married at 20,
Hmm.
and he was like telling me it goes to show you like it doesn't matter. Marriage doesn't matter about like just because you get married doesn't mean you're necessarily mature.
Right.
Especially for him, he was like, when I was 20, I didn't know what I was doing.
Because there are people my age already getting divorced.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like on the flip side of that, my parents got married at
Yeah. Same. My parents were
19
young.
and 20, I think, or
Yeah.
21.
Yeah. I think my mom was 21.
It comes down to the
So-
individual, right? It's the
Yeah.
circumstances.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And like we look for these like huge markers of achievement in life to like mark maturity, right? Like
Oh.
with coming of age ceremonies, I think. what they're
Wow.
called.
That's a very good point.
And so like
Yeah.
we were talking about like marriage, right? So like graduating, like
Mhm.
your
Mhm.
bachelor's degree, your master's, your PhD, you're married, you have a kid, you have 2 kids, right?
Mm.
You have that, 6-figure job. That's a lot of money. 5, 6, whatever. How much? I don't know. Y'all are richer than I am.
Five figures, that's still a huge range. From like 10K to
Yeah. Like below the poverty line.
yeah.
Which I am. Yeet.
I think I'm there.
Technically
I might be a
low.
little bit above.
I think I'm technically still lower class.
That's sad. Oh, I mean, I'm definitely. Anyways, tangent. But so like we look for these like huge markers in life to like show that we're maturity, right? A lot of that is like, oh, we need to justify it to ourselves, but also others are like, oh, look at me, I've achieved so much in life.
Mhm.
I'm married now, right?
Right.
And like, I think marriage is great, right?
Mm.
I want to get married.
Yeah, me too. That'd
Samesies.
be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, we are all a
I was
ways away
thinking
from
the
that.
same thing you were thinking.
3 single guys in a church podcast.
Which one of us is gonna get married first?
I'm calling you, man.
Are we
Really?
talking age or time frame?
Oh, interesting. Both.
That's actually such a good point, though.
Yeah.
Not that-
Yeah, I
whatever
don't
you
know what's
just
going on there.
said. But so you see, the phrase that you use that caught my ear was coming of age, right? Especially in the world that we live in, films, media, we always have the coming of age story, right?
Mhm.
I think it's been brainwashed into us for so many years, right? It's like, oh, like for instance, like I think about like prom as a coming of age
Yeah,
story.
no, for
right?
sure.
Everyone's like, ooh, prom, or like, ooh, your first kiss, ooh, all these things, and then like, I dare talk about kissing on a Christian podcast. Oh no! But people look for certain things to
Judas.
define it. Do you call me Judas?
Sorry.
Coming of age. Ugh. But yeah, so because I think about like baptism.
Yeah.
People say, "Look at me, I got baptized," but then there's such a disappointment. People are like, "Oh, I'm not more mature. I'm not more wise than I was before my baptism."
Mhm.
When baptism is simply just a proclamation of your like faith to God, right? And
Mhm.
like showing that.
In
Yeah.
some sense, it's almost like an admission of like I'm not good enough. You know, it's a key factor of
Yeah.
Christianity. Like I don't have to be good enough.
Mhm.
I'm like so hung up on the marriage thing because I had a friend. She was like, once you get married, you become so mature. You're forced into maturity, and I disagree with that because you're not gonna be forced into it. You'll have more experiences, and that make you more mature, but
Mhm.
it doesn't. It's not streamlined, right?
Yeah.
Like
is
we
it-
talk about divorce, that it
Yeah.
happens, right? Sorry, you're saying.
Or is it like a scale? Like I'm a 86% mature.
Right.
Yes.
I'm almost there.
Right, like, what?
Yeah.
And like you brought up the point of like baptism, right? And like
Yeah.
I think this realization of like God will use sometimes the weirdest things to make you more either emotionally, physically, spiritually mature, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, anyways, but like
Working out.
yeah, I guess
Mhm.
hit by a train and you're like, woo, I don't know, I don't know that's going on here, but like
There's a railroad track like half a mile from here, right?
road trip. But so yeah, God will use sometimes weird. I mean, my life is titled "God is going to use weird things," but yeah, I don't know. Anyways, actually, ironic story about a train track. Not going to go on that tangent right now, but
Oh, I'm so curious.
Nah,
We have to make a Tyler
remind me.
episode.
I'd love talking about me. It's like my favorite
You're
pastime.
so humble.
Oh, incredibly.
Tyler's the most humble.
So
Humble. You
mature.
look up humble in the dictionary. It's just a picture of my face. That's humble right there. Truly humble.
Sit down.
Sit You made me forget what the heck I was gonna say.
You're talking about maturity. Go.
Oh, so like these coming of life moments, we sometimes put this weight on them of like they will guarantee this increase of 5% of maturity, right?
Yeah.
Which makes no sense.
Even if
Right.
we don't assign any numbers, it's the
Right, right, right.
implication that it launches us forward.
But yet it might. So like that's the crazy thing. It's like maybe when you do get married, right?
Mhm.
I mean, none of us have been married,
Mm.
but I was just checking in real quick. But like maybe that will be like that turning moment. You go like, wait, like
Sorry.
Wow.
Sorry.
Actually, please pick it up. If
I'm
it's
not
your-
going to answer a phone call on the podcast.
At least check who it is, because if it's your sister or something, an emergency,
It's okay. We're
I can
good.
edit this out.
Yeah, we're good. Don't worry. I checked. We're good.
okay, so
Yes. I love our derpy faces. Continue.
nervous.
Derpist Markbeth.
But I think so. We like maybe that moment will be a pinnacle moment of change. We're like,
Yeah.
oh, like wait, like this is showing some brokenness,
Mhm.
showing some immaturity. Those are two concepts that go a lot alike. But like maybe it will. But putting that value of like this will change
Mm.
immediately, like God's gonna be like, okay, no, like that's kind
Yeah.
of blasphemy, but that's okay.
No, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Because this summer, like, okay, now that I'm employed, but like, I was so fixed, like, 2 months ago, I was so fixated on two things: getting my driver's license and getting getting a job, right? Multiple times over the summer, God said no.
Mm.
And I think for me, that made me realize, I was so hung up on focusing on those two things. Like, I was like, if I get my license, I'm like getting my life together. If I get a job, I'm like, I'm automatically like into the next stage of life and like ready and everything. But in reality, that wasn't the case.
Mhm.
Like, I am not defined by my successes or failures, but it's the experiences that I went through that then gives shape to my character.
Yeah, absolutely. That was well said.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, God definitely uses weird things to make us mature.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Big
And
time.
like saying no is such a so annoying and defeating, but
Mm.
this happens a lot
Yeah.
where God will just be like,
Yeah.
My plan's better."
Yeah. I don't remember if I said this on the podcast yet or not, but like I've just stopped making plans for the most part because every time God's just like, no, that plan's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
You're doing this.
We've been talking so negatively about age. Like, age doesn't necessarily determine things.
Mhm.
But what's a case where we have to use age as something like? Well, you wrote it well. At what point do you think it's valid to take somebody's age into consideration?
Mm.
I mean, it's immediately extreme. Like, we should probably not put a 5-year-old
Right.
in charge of like any
Most
type of
things.
most things, right?
Yeah.
Like 5-year-olds, great. They're probably they're good at playing soccer. I don't know. And maybe there's a 5-year-old who's like a CEO level type of guy, right? Who
Isn't that
knows?
essentially like the plot of Boss Baby?
Lol, I didn't mean that, but that's funny. But like, of course, there's gonna be weird circumstances where age doesn't play a part. But there's extreme examples, of course, like a 5-year-old being in a position of leadership. Probably not a good call, right?
Right.
But also, like, there's times where I'm like, oh, I got this, right? Like, I don't care if I'm 19. I still, like, I'm better than this. Like, I got this. And then I'm like, oh, well, actually, I'm kind of dumb.
Right.
It's like, I probably should have waited a couple years, right?
Yeah.
Because there's like, what is it? Like the idea of like the maturity or like the ability to handle something, right? I think patience is a good example of this, right? Some people have a lot of patience at a younger age, but some people, patience is developed over time. When I work with little kids, something you have to take into consideration is the idea of how long is too long for them to sit still, right? So I was doing fishy cross my ocean, and you have these kids who are like tagging each other, but I realized I had kids who were supposed to stay in place for 15 minutes. That's how long a game is average, right? And if you're that one kid who's super slow and you get tagged in the first like round, you're stuck
It's a
there
long
forever.
time,
It's so long, yeah. And that's where I think like that can come into play. Wow, actually, I don't. What I'm trying to say, the ability, like for instance, like if you put, I think back to a couple years ago, we had a hub Christmas party, and the kids who led the games were early high schoolers. And they got so frustrated because no one was listening, and they're just like, come on, like, why aren't you guys listening and everything? And they didn't have the patience to like listen, like guide the younger kids to do the things that they were doing. And now to tie that in, I know Josh has a rule that freshman year people in their freshman year of college cannot start hub until the second semester, because he wants them to get used to college for one semester and then dive into the hub. Like, something that blew my mind was when we were hanging out at the hub barbecue. Kyle is only 2 years younger than I am.
Wow.
Put that into
Crazy.
perspective.
Yeah, I know.
Hi, Kyle. By the way,
Kyle.
I know you're listening.
Kyle's our biggest fan.
Yeah.
Make more.
When he was telling me that, oh yeah, I'm 21 and I can drink, I was just like, I'm 23.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Because I've talked to you about this. I'm like, do you want to join the hub? I know you're 19 now. You've been out of that age range for so long, or like a year.
Yeah, I don't
Like,
think
you could
so
pretend-
long is the right word for that.
Yeah.
But
It
like,
was a long year, but yes.
it has been a long year.
Yeah.
But like what is that? I would argue that's an instance where I think age does come into play, right?
Yeah, because like that's a rule that makes sense to me. If you're right out of high school and you just get back in the same swing of things, there's virtually no difference between you and a high school senior at that point.
You're just living on your own to some degree.
Sometimes not even not, but yes.
Yeah. So, like, yeah, I would take age into consideration there. And
I mean, there's a reason why, like, the state of Massachusetts requires you to be 16 and a half to get a driver's license.
Like, you can't run for president until you're 35.
Which makes me very upset. I'm never gonna. I was sure a joke. I'm never gonna run for president.
Same.
But
I'm voting for Thomas. Though.
Thomas and I
will vote for
made a
Thomas.
pact though. If I run for president, he's my vice president. If he runs for president, I'm his vice president.
What if you're selling toilets and then he becomes president?
I have to be vice president?
And if he's selling toilets,
He has to be vice president.
Oh, there's a good government analogy in there somewhere.
yeah.
Toilets.
Anyways,
Yeah.
but yeah. So potentially Thomas Franklin, works his way up there. Might be Vice President Page right here.
maybe I won't vote for Thomas.
I would be great. Would be the best election cycle ever.
I was very surprised that when I joined the hub, Josh was okay for letting. Oh, I mean, I was 19 at the time, your age, to join
Younger.
the hub. Wow, I met you when I was 19.
You met me when I was younger than I am right now.
That's crazy.
That was not English, but that's
No, that
okay.
wasn't. And it's also very straightforward. But like, I know my church, when it comes to youth group, they actually don't let anyone who's in college be a youth group leader. Their rule is the next life stage. So they think that high schoolers are too close to college students. College students are just gonna hype up high school hype up college for them, and they're gonna go in with like wild expectations. And to some degree, that actually happened to me. But they usually want people in the next life stage, so like their early life careers or later life careers, to talk to high schoolers because they want like a separation of life expectancy, life
Whoa.
stage, to like, because it's like the safer side of those people who are in the next life stage tend to have a bit more experience and a bit more maturity and wisdom than those who are in this life stage that's like right next to it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. I feel like it's easy to put, and I say this every time.
Of course.
It's easy to put like a catch-all or like a
Yeah.
this is what should be, and of course like that's justifiable and that makes sense. And like I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think realizing there's exceptions to the rule.
Yeah. Like I mean, we've seen our own ministry with
Yeah.
college students work.
Yeah.
Succeed to some extent.
Yeah.
If youth ministry can ever truly succeed.
I think I mean, you have a new potential worship leader on the rise, right?
Oh yeah.
And I believe that's going to be such a fruitful time for him because he's never actually led like a legitimate he wasn't like the front runner to like lead everything.
Yeah.
But he's witnessed it on like the training and on so many levels.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Aaron Jung's only a year older than you, right?
Yep. Not even. I think it's like
Yeah, you
5,
guys might-
6 months.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
that's
young. I'm
crazy.
old.
Wow. I love that guy.
What about this one?
Nah,
I
Tyler's.
I have
over it.
my moments.
Yeah. Your novelty wore off.
Oh, lol. We should wrap up.
Yeah.
What about
absolutely.
mentorships? Because I think that personally, that's where I think age comes into. And like, I would never ask like you to be my mentor. No offense.
You mean I
Maybe
couldn't-
like a hair mentor.
I don't know. It's,
You go
it's
for hair when he's
Yeah.
like a chef.
this is a struggle
Oh,
studio
right.
right
I would
now.
ask
Well,
you
I'm
to-
balding, so I'm just.
Like, I'd ask Tyler to be my chef mentor, but life mentor.
Right.
The kid hasn't even graduated college
Hey,
yet.
whoa! Started. Haven't even started yet.
We'll catch you in part 2 of this episode, but like and subscribe our YouTube page, and we out. Or is it have a good one?
Have a good one. We out.
Both. We out.
We out.
Out.
All right.